Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another Total War Warhammer 2 quick match double cast. So this time around we are, for this first match, on the Ancient Dragon Cave, playing as the High Elves against the forces of the Vampire Counts. And like I've said before, just getting hyped, getting really worked up, getting stoked for the release of the DLC. So just playing as the High Elves, playing as Dark Elves, playing as the Greenskins, who are getting quite a bit of a buff. And in this case, we are playing as the High Elves. So quickly, we'll go through the build and kind of discuss what I'm doing here. Obviously, I'm mostly just looking forward to the DLC at this point. The High Elves are going to get huge buffs with the Sisters of the Avalorn, especially. That's a huge change to their current. It's a huge solution to one of their problems. One of their biggest problems is large units with armor, which the High Elves really struggle to shut down because their only real counter is Phoenix Guard and Dragons, both of which are incredibly expensive and one of which is inflexible. So the Sister of Avalorn should give them some decent counterplay, and that's really what I'm hyped for. But either way, right now, if you want to deal with large, you got to come up with alternative solutions. So here, for my Lord, I decided to bring Teclis. Teclis, of course, is a decent choice. Actually, this is one of the more common builds I've been seeing and been trying out myself lately. Teclis on a horse, coming in with most of the spells. I did bring Kindle Flame. I wasn't really sure what my opponent would bring, so I brought Kindle Flame, Wild Heart, Shield of Sapphire, of course Great Arc and Conduit, Net of Mintok, Flaming Sword of Ruin, Enfeebling Foe, Regrowth, Flock of Doom, and a Potion of Troy, as well as the Bound Fiery Convocation. Because with Undead, you never know what they're going to bring. They could bring a whole bunch of chaff. They could bring regenning units. They could bring. They could obviously bring Fate of Buna. They could bring some monsters, and so a spell for every situation. Two nobles are flanking him here, and of course, with their anti-large, armor piercing, and decent melee stats, they will be a good counter to any black chariots my opponent would bring. Some Terrorgeists, Blood Knights, Black Knights, Manfred on a dragon, like you see here, and those sorts of things. The nobles will do well, especially with Teclis backing them up, netting units, and hitting them with regrowth, that sort of thing. My front line, it is very, very elite and very AP and anti-infantry oriented. 4 units of White Lions of Crace backed by 2 Swordmasters should be able to hack and slash their way through anything my opponent puts on the field, especially units like these Graveguard or Skeleton Warriors or Skeleton Spears and those sorts of trash units. In the back, we have 2 Archers with light armor. You might be wondering why bother with light armor. I often bash these guys, say they're pretty trash. They kind of are, or they're not really worth the cost usually, but at the same time, they will hold up a little better to, say, zombie summons. And I had a handful of points left over, so I figured why not. They're slightly chevroned up as well, so they should hold okay. And up in the sky, we do have a Frostar Phoenix, which is definitely one of those powerful niche picks for the High Elves in this matchup. One, it does magic damage, which is pretty good against the units like ethereal units, which the vampires of course can bring, but probably more importantly, it's got this debuff aura. That's not it, that's its ward save, but it's got a Blizzard aura, which is -9 melee attack, -10% AP damage, which can really help because undead units tend to have trash melee stats. They usually compensate with magic and just mass and numbers and heals and just outlasting you, but with Blizzard aura, they're going to struggle to hit. It's a major debuff to any Graveguard or much less lesser infantry, and even big units like Cav and whatnot. For my opponent's army, you can see definitely going very wide and already flanking. You can see things already kicking off, getting heated. For his center, my opponent does have a few Graveguard, actually quite a few Graveguard, Sternsmen, spears in the back and flanks, some Skeleton Warriors helping stiffen things up, a unit of Dire Pack in the woods over there. The Feasters in the Dusk, like I often say, they're a bit of a niche, but definitely one of those hidden gems, I think, in the roster. Over here in this back, 2 Fellbats, a Terrorgeist, as well as a Manfred on a Dragon, coming in with Fate of Buna, Invocation of Nak, Raise Dead, Spirit Leech, and Master of the Dark Arts. So the usual sort of build with Manny there. So you can see immediately my Frostar Phoenix does dive into the Graveguard, or the Sternsmen, tying them down and baiting my opponent to come down to fight him. In the meantime, though, you can see over here the White Lions already slugging out with the Graveguard, doing rather well in that fight, but my opponent does hit my Swordmasters of Hoth with a Fate of Buna, doing immense damage, and I immediately counter with a overcast version of Regrowth. So that is going to be very expensive. It's a very expensive cast, but at the same time it should undo at least some of the damage and help these Swordmasters of Hoth hold their own against these Graveguard. But unfortunately my opponent is not going to let up. He hits them with a breath attack there, nuking them down significantly, and with a final Terror charge from Manfred, they are not going to last long. They're going to simply rout. Unfortunately though, with the Regrowth still going off and healing them, it's only about halfway through. They're going to get quite a bit of healing, and they're going to actually keep their strength up quite a bit. And of course the White Lions actually do hold, and you can see my archers now firing away, whittling Manfred down. Over here, Bound Fiery Convocation hitting my opponent's troops. He does try to pull away, but it's not going to be fast enough. And over here you can see the Noble and Teclis and the Pigeon just beating down on the Terrorgeist, just laying the smackdown on that fool. And you can see over here the Pigeon just running down the line and even roasting some of these Graveguard and Skeleton Warriors. Even as these archers just unload on Manfred whittling him down and doing immense amounts of work. Over here you can see the Swordmasters of Hoeth getting broken, but they are going to rally pretty shortly. Fortunately for me, because these Feasters in the Dusk, if they'd gotten a jump on these guys, would have been a disaster for me. They would have absolutely wiped this unit. But you can see they come back and they've still got 64 models. Regrowth really healed them for quite a bit, and they're still over 50% HP, all that sort of stuff. Manfred does dive in on these archers, but the archers will be able to hold. And here in the pits, you can see the Fellbats getting wiped out. Sternsmen holding their own, but not that much of a buff. You can see the Invocation deck going down. The Bats falling apart, and you can see the Froststar Phoenix trying to get out and fight Manfred. Over here you can see the Skeleton Warriors, Graveguard, and all these chaff units actually failing against the White Lions, who are really holding their own here. One of the big problems is if you bring an elite infantry unit like this against, say, White Lions, it's often, or not elite, but a better infantry unit like this, it's often not the best idea to oversaturate them, because here, rather than getting the full might of the Graveguard against the Graveguard, you're not really getting that much out of these guys. At the same time, the White Lions are able to clear up all your chaff and slowly but surely chip away at your Graveguard. So I think a little bit of a mistake there. Had my opponent pincered me, it would have been a much worse situation for me. Over on the flanks, though, you can see I do net down Manfred, hit him with the Pigeon. The Pigeon, of course, not the best melee stats. It's more a defensive and support unit, but doing quite a bit of work there. And of course, the archers are unloading on it with with extreme prejudice there. You can see Master of the Black Arcs going down. Arts. Over here, Techless in a bad spot, but I do hit all these troops with a Flock of Doom, beating down those dire wolves and all those units, and now finally this flank cleared up. I actually completely forgot about this flank, and they'd cleared this up a while ago. Means that my troops can shift over and start engaging these enemy troops, the Sternsmen, the Dire Pack, and all that sort of chaff infantry. Over here, the archers doing a decent job peppering down Manfred, and my opponent actually playing it cautious here with the Feasters in the Dusk, perhaps forgetting about him in the woods. As the Swordmasters of Hoeth absolutely hew their way through these Skeleton Warriors, through these Graveguard, and of course, as long as they stay over 50%, their stats are absolutely monstrous. My opponent is not letting up, though. He is spending even more Winds of Magic on these guys. Another Fate of Buna, another 20 Winds of Magic. The problem is, I think this is a little bit of a mistake on my opponent's part, is he is spending 20 Winds of Magic to hit these Swordmasters of Hoeth, and they will get nuked very heavily here. But I still have another healthy unit of Swordmasters over on this end. I still have the White Lions. I still have Techless and the two-man Goon Squad with the Nobles. And more White Lions. And really, at this point, my opponent needs to shut down my Lords. They're a much bigger threat to his large than the infantry ever will be, though. You can see the balance of power definitely moving in my favor, but you can see over here the Terror guys getting caught up on the ground. The Nobles get in, Techless gets in, and they're absolutely beating the snot out of this poor giant bat, and it's getting absolutely nuked. And I do hit it with an enfeebling foe, debuffing its stats so that it's getting absolutely pounded by everything around it, and it's not going to last very long. Over here, perhaps after bashing the archers with light armor for so long, here you guys will get to see them in their natural element, holding their own against Dire Pack and Graveguard, those sorts of units. You can see the Terror guys does go down. The Dire Pack will surround these guys, but with their decent armor, despite the anti-large bonus here, these guys won't do that well. The White Lions here holding the zombies up, preventing the archers from getting swamped, and because my opponent's invested so much in the Fate of Buna, he doesn't have any more disruptive spells, really. He doesn't have enough for Invocations in the Heck. He doesn't have enough for Spirit Leeches even to hit Techless or the Nobles or units like that. So I'm just holding my own here, popping a potion of Troy, healing up, beating down the Dire Pack, who's of course being debuffed by the Frosty Aura. And I'm actually leaving these archers with light armor in the fight. You might say that's dumb or it's not really a good plan, but as long as I can just hold these guys down, I know that I can beat down the Dire Pack. I'll be able to beat down these Sternsmen. I really just need to buy time over here, wipe out these troops, and I'll be good. Over here, the White Lions do get rushed and caught out by the Feasters in the Dusk, so terrible for them, but really this unit was mauled and basically out of commission anyway. The Swordmasters decide to come back for another go with 34 models. White Lions here, winning with over half HP left on the board, 136 kills to their name, and these Graveguard getting massacred. In the meantime, the Archers still unloading on Manfred, another Flock of Doom going down, melting these Graveguard, melting the Skeleton Spears, and putting my opponent in a rough spot as Manfred is just getting whittled down. He does pop Invocation in the Heck, trying to keep himself up to tip-top shape, but it's really not enough. It's just so much Focus Fire raining in. The Froststar Phoenix in there, debuffing everything, making the Graveguard, which is already not great against large targets, even worse. The Dire Pack, of course, being much worse, and Manfred himself just struggling to land hits, despite the very mauled shape of these units. And this is really where I think, had my opponent used a Spirit Leech earlier, the Noble, you could always use Breath Attacks, and Breath Attacks are much more reliable at nuking down units like these Swordmasters, like these White Lions, and units like that. You can always use Breath Attacks for that, and personally I think, had my opponent used some Spirit Leeches here, at least one, maybe two of these Nobles could have been dead by now, because I just didn't have the Winds of Magic for regrowth. So, a little bit of a mistake I think on my opponent's part. You can see Manfred does try to take off while the Noble and all of them over here are holding their own. You can see my opponent's army finally does just crumble to army losses, leaving the game as a close victory for the High Elves. And really, I think just a handful of different choices on my opponent's part would have actually made the difference there between a close and Pyrrhic victory or maybe even a defeat. I do think this is a pretty competitive build against the undead. If your opponent brings a lot of cav, you're going to struggle a bit, but that's really where the nets and the snares and the Froststar Phoenix come in. The Froststar Phoenix is pretty good at tying up cav. Your opponent will obviously expect some Phoenix guards, so it's not likely they'll go too heavily into large. The Swordmasters and White Lions, despite not being dedicated anti-large, will do okay, especially if you net say a unit of Black Knights down or a unit of Blood Knights down. They'll beat them up. If your opponent brings, and this is actually one of the key reasons why I brought Techless, if your opponent brings ethereal units, you have Flaming Sword of Ruin, which is a great saving grace. And really, these guys, as you saw, they even hit by Fate of Buna. I'm not even sure which of these Swordmasters got hit by Fate of Buna, to be quite frank with you guys, but one of them got dead. Either way, they still got over 100 kills there, and especially with the counter from the play with the regrowth, it was really pretty. These guys really did an amazing job, and this sort of front line can really tear through the chaff and the trash sort of troops Vampire Counts can bring. The archers applied some decent pressure and actually held their own in a protracted fight against Graveguard and Spears. Obviously, they lost and didn't do much in return, but they held their own, which is what counted. Froststar Phoenix, Nobles, and Techless did a great job hunting down the monsters. So I think this is a pretty solid build for the High Elves if you're trying to deal with Vampire Counts. Perhaps not the best of builds. I've had a lot of success with other variations, but definitely a lot of fun. For my opponent's build, a few things. I think definitely he was a little slow on using his Feasters in Dusk. I think perhaps forgetting about them. I also think that he should have been better about using his breath attacks. He dove right in with the Terrorgeist prematurely, not using a breath attack there, not using the breath attacks, only getting 2 of his breath attacks off of Manfred, and instead trying to use Fate of Buna to nuke down Swordmaster of Hoeth. And while potentially a good idea, especially to get, say, 1 regrowth out of me, using it repeatedly towards the end game, I think was a waste. Spirit Leech could have made the difference by killing some of these Nobles and Techless. So without further ado, otherwise I do think this build was good, and I don't think there was too much wrong with it. Especially with the way my opponent was obviously trying to go for a more mob heavy and with just some slight elite support build. Regardless, good game to Angroth, and we are going to hop on to game number 2 just to break things down there. So this time around we are on the map Carrick Drawn, once again High Elves again, but this time around against Chaos, and this is one of the matchups where I think the Sisters of Averlorn are going to make a huge difference for the forces of the High Elves, because this is actually a rather tough matchup for the High Elves in my opinion, just because of the monstrous creatures that the Chaos troops can bring. And you can see here my opponent did bring Kolek, he did bring some Chaos Trolls with armor, and that's going to be a rather big challenge for me. So regardless, jumping straight into the sort of build we brought here, we do have Techless once again, with flanked by the 2 Nobles, slight changes in the composition of equipment, still the same sort of, I was very much on the fence about Boundfire Convocation, but then I figured, you know, my opponent might bring Marauders, maybe bring it. Bushman of Troy, Regrowth, once again Flock of Doom, Enfeebling Foe, and Net of Mintok, but no Kindle Flame or Failing Sword of Ruin, so that's really the only major change there. Flanked by 2 Nobles once again for that anti-large goon squad, a front line of very spaced out Swordmasters of Hoeth, and these guys will trade okay with Chosen with Grey Weapons. I do believe they beat them depending on the situation, and they can definitely trade pretty effectively, and otherwise they will absolutely dumpster lower end Chaos troops, even including Chaos Warriors with Grey Weapons. In the back, once again, those Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers, actually not once again, but much akin to the Dark Elf play I've been doing. 2 Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers who can immediately start chipping away at my opponent's troops. Backed on one end by Phoenix Guard, and on the other, because I was too poor, a unit of Spearmen. Finally, in the front, we do have 2 Illyrian Reavers, who are going to immediately actually charge at these Wild Hounds. And you might think that's silly, but I didn't want these guys interfering with my backline, and I figured, you know what, we're going to get rid of them as quickly as we can, get a charge off, and Illyrian Reavers will outtrade them in melee, despite the poison, despite the debuffs and all that sort of stuff. We will dumpster them quick, get them off the field, and then have a safer backline. For my opponent's build, a front line, and shortly we will start firing at the Chosen with Grey Weapons with our Grape Shot. A front line of very heavy of Chaos Warriors. My opponent went very heavy on AP here. So 5 units of Chaos Warriors with Grey Weapons, Chosen with Grey Weapons, anchoring everything in the center. Chaos Trolls armored on both ends. Kolek, Sorcerer of Shadows with Enfeebling Foe, Malkath's Mystify Miasma, and Penumbral Pendulum, and then a single unit of Marauder Horsemen on the very far end. So definitely a tough build for me to crack, and you can see the Grape Shot immediately firing away. And this is definitely, no matter how good Swordmasters might be, this is just way too many troops for me to beat through super effectively. You can see the Grape Shot there whittling down the Chosen, doing a decent job, but Chosen are fairly elite and small unit size, so it's going to be a little rough to get full value. And you can see Perhaps not doing the most amazing job. We've taken about 1,000 HP off him so far. So definitely, of course, they are spaghetti lined, which is making life very difficult here. And probably I should have had single shot going at Kolek instead. Nonetheless, I've already routed the two hounds off. You can see these guys are beaten down. They've lost about 11 models, but they'll rout off 2 hounds, which this is almost 1,000 points of my opponent's army already off the field in exchange for a handful of Illyrian Reavers. So not a bad trade, and you can see we are already peppering down the Chaos Warriors with great weapons with our Illyrian Reaver bows. In the meantime, in the front line, you can see I did fall back a little bit with the Swordmasters, worried as I was about these Horsemasters. And my opponent does hit the Swordmasters over here with a Melkoth Miasma, which does okay damage, surprisingly. So it'll chip them down a bit, be a nuisance. You can see single shot switching out to Kolek. I do actually net the Chaos Sorcerer, hoping to dive in on him, but my opponent's front line overtakes me. And now we are going to engage on these Marauder Horsemen, trying to push them off and away from my Swordmasters, who I really need to stay in tip-top shape. In the meantime, the Illyrian Reavers do fall back, and you can see the Swordmasters diving in against the Chosen. It's definitely going to be a little bit of a rough fight, but neither side here got a great charge, which is going to be good for me, because the Swordmasters don't have that good of a charge bonus. The Chosen do. Over here in the front line, in the meantime, my opponent's army is stacking on top of these Swordmasters. I'm going to drop an Overcast Regrowth on the Swordmasters of Hoth over here, just to keep them alive, and cast an Overcast Fiery Convocation. Meantime, the Illyrian Reaver Archers will be able to start whittling down those cast trolls, and you can see the spears here moving in to reinforce. Fortunately, I do forget about those Illyrian Reaver Archers over there, so I'm not getting them into the fight here, which is a little bit of a mistake. But you can see that Roast actually beating down, doing a little bit of damage to these Chaos Warriors. In the meantime, I was trying to pick off Kolek, but failed, and while he's still getting peppered by that Bolt Thrower fire, you can see it actually, I think it actually missed there and hit those guys, but still peppering away at Kolek. You can see we are running around and trying to get around the flanks. Now over here, you can see we're going to get a little bit of a rear charge here on these Chosen, on these Chaos Warriors, doing some work. You can see the Illyrian Reavers finally coming back as my opponent's forces over here collapse, and this is a big win and definitely a very important win for me, because if I can get these guys off the field, I do have the mobility, I do still have the troop count to push them away, to get rid of them for good. My opponent, though, over here using a Lord of the Storm to very great effect. You can see this blob of Phoenix Guard, and I really didn't have the options to deny this, and it just hits like a truck and knocks about 15 models off. So definitely some brutal stuff there, but we are beating down these Chosen. These Chaos Warriors have been routed, and now the Chaos Trolls will not be long for this world, because they have terrible morale, and they're going to get flanked, they're going to get pincered, they're going to collapse incredibly quickly. Unfortunately, though, the Reaper Bolt Thrower, or the Eagle Cloud Bolt Thrower, does get massacred here. You can see some guys turning into fine red mist as they flee. Poor guy, look at them. They're just poor elves. But over here, similar situation for these Swordmasters who are fleeing for dear life on 21 models and no HP. But the Illyrian Reaver is still chipping away, and now really it's the mother of all battles here in the pits. You can see Teclis hitting Kolek with the net, and of course Kolek doesn't have any source of healing, so if we're able to surround him and beating down here with Feebling Foe, he is in for a very bad time. You can see he's getting chipped away at very quickly, losing his HP. He's already down to under half, and in for a rough time, especially with that Bolt Thrower fire still pouring in. Over on the flank, I do intercept the Chaos Sorcerer of Shadows with the Illyrian Reavers, figuring it's a worthy sacrifice while still using these spears to chase the Chaos Warriors off. And this was a bit of a mistake. I honestly should have just left these guys. They were so low on HP and morale that if my spearmen stopped chasing them and they came back, it wouldn't matter. I could charge them with Teclis and they'd rout. Unfortunately, though, I do continue pursuing, so I'm going to pay for that. But over here, the Illyrian Reaver Archers, once again, forcing those trolls off. And this is another 1,000-point investment of my opponent being chased off the field in its entirety. These Chaos Warriors will never come back. They're so beaten up. And now Kolek over here is trying to interfere to save his mage. But once again, we are using these Illyrian Reaver Archers and their mass to just stop Kolek. They are not going to win. They're not even going to do much damage to Kolek, but it doesn't matter. They've been taking some friendly fire there. They're taking it for the cause and tying him down. So you can see we are shutting down this Sorcerer over here. You can see the Bolt Thrower still firing away at Kolek, trying to bring him down. And the Sorcerer here just getting mown down, getting impaled by that Noble, and he is having a very bad time. And my opponent is using another Lord of the Storm, big waste, honestly, of that spell. I mean, these guys can basically shrug it off, but we do rout the Chaos Sorcerer, even as the Illyrian Reavers rout, but they've still got over half their models, so they can keep chipping away. Unfortunately, though, my Infantry Blob abandoned is going to collapse to terror here as Kolek does dive in. You can see the Lord of the Storm there, still on about 30 HP, jumping in to rout these guys. Over here, the Trolls being routed off by the Illyrian Reavers, run down and forced off. And definitely things looking a little grim. Now you can see the balance of power is very much in my favor. And to be fair, I'm not entirely sure why. Probably because of this very healthy unit of spears, which is finally making its way back. But you can see over here the Chaos Sorcerer has been shattered. But really, we don't have too much going for us. We got this very beaten down unit of Swordmasters, this beaten down unit of Swordmasters, all the Swordmasters are basically dead, and only the Phoenix and even the Phoenix Guard are basically slaughtered. So really, not much troops power left. Only those spears and a Bolt Thrower on less than half ammo, and this ragtag group of heroes. But of them, Teclis can't fight, and the Noble is just one noble. But regardless, it's definitely a tough situation, but I do still have a handful of skirmishers. We are forcing some of these troops out the field. And my opponent routs me here, but he doesn't have the speed to pursue. And as he does overextend a little bit here with Kolek, we are going to get a catch on him. And he does interdict here with the trolls. The trolls are going to be a nuisance, but of course, with the anti-large bonus of the nobles, you can see Teclis just going balls deep there, chasing after Kolek, but he does pull back because, of course, I don't want to lose Teclis. That would be a disaster at this point. You see the Chaos Trolls here getting beaten down. They're going to rout, of course, because they've got terrible leadership. So things definitely looking very, very tight. This is, I honestly thought this was a lot tighter than the stats indicate. Regardless, I do get a bit of a cast here of the Fiery Convocation. This is not going to do a lot of damage. It's not really going to do very much to these guys at all. There's this lone Phoenix Guard here who gets roasted by it. It's going to do some damage to these guys, but really, the main thing is it gave me breathing space. It gave me the time for these troops to fall back, to rally, to regroup. You can see the Lyrian Reavers are back, the Bolt Thrower is back, firing at Kolek, and that opportunity to regroup is all I needed. You can see the Marauder Horsemen here getting chipped away at by the Lyrian Reavers. You can see the Swordmasters have rallied, and these Spearmen are now holding their own, just holding the ground here. And with their monsters melee defense of 50, they're going to be able to do it. They'll be able to hold their own here. You can see Kolek here getting a little greedy, pulling out to try to fight Teclis and Nobles. Huge mistake, as he's going to get skewered by those anti-large halberds and forced to rout ignominiously from the field. So with this Illyrian Archer fire coming in from the flanks, you can see these Swordmasters diving in, looking to make their people proud. These Swordmasters here chopping down Marauder Horsemen, basically out of ammo, but you can see the pursuit just going down. These Illyrian Reavers forcing my opponent back. You can see Teclis here in very desperate straits, trying to worm his way out, but just getting beaten down. I do pop a Potion of Troy, though, which provides a pretty significant boost to healing, and at this point my opponent's army simply routes to fear, or actually not even to fear, probably just to army losses, honestly, giving me a Pyrrhic victory. So this is one of the matchups where I think the High Elves are going to get a massive buff. Currently, their only real ranged AP is Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers, which, while they definitely did some chip damage to Kolek and did a little bit, they just can't do that enough work, and they can't shut down anything like Chosen. They can't really shut down Chaos Warriors all that well. Like they're just not a good enough unit for the situation, and so I really think that the Sisters of Avalorn, if you can get like 2 of them into a High Elf army against Chaos, you'll be in a much better position. As for this build, given what apologies there. That's what we currently have. I do think this is a pretty decent build if you need to counter Chaos. Swordmasters, you can see some of them got nuked pretty hard. They got put in a rough position, and they were outnumbered by a lot. So it is what it is. But the Swordmasters definitely trading pretty well. They put the hurt down on these Chaos Warriors. They put the hurt down on the Chosen and the Trolls even, and helped hold the line where it was a real mess. Phoenix Guard, similar thing. They just held. And this sort of match definitely came down to more of a sort of strategic lord sniping than anything else, as the 2 armies basically slaughtered each other in the pits. In the end, Teclis was near dead, so was one noble. Only one noble was really rather healthy, while the rest of my army was effectively dead. My opponent's army was a little more alive, but the trolls did get routed off completely, as did the hounds, and that's, I think, definitely showed just how important it is to route these units out the field. Of my opponent's army, he lost about 2,000 units routed, 2,000 points worth of units, who were purely just chased off the field by a smaller investment of my own infantry. Spearmen actually chasing off the Chaos Warriors, another roughly 850 point investment chased off by 500. A lone unit of Illyrian Reavers chased off 1,000 points worth of trolls, and then another 900 or 875 points worth of Chaos Warhounds. So that was a very, I think, decisive moment for me. My opponent wasn't really able to pursue my troops off the field. He didn't manage to pursue those routing Swordmasters. He couldn't even catch the Swordmasters and Phoenix Guard when they broke, because Teclis and the nobles were in the zone, on point to shut Kolek down and prevent him from pursuing. So definitely, I think that was a big game changer there. For my opponent, definitely not a bad build against High Elves, honestly. This is brutal stuff that the High Elves struggled to match. And actually, very similar to some of the builds I tend to run against the High Elves. One of the interesting things was the Chaos Trolls, which I think did a decent job, all things told. But definitely, this is a brutal build for High Elves to counter. So, good game to Angroth here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I do hope you found it entertaining and perhaps a little informative. As usual, guys, I do appreciate all for watching. If you have any comments and criticisms, please share, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, thank you all, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Bye for now.